We all know retirement can be a daunting task for many. There are so many things to consider when making this big decision. Several years ago, you came up with a process that helps your firm walk families through several key areas of retirement that helps bring clarity to their retirement. This process is known as your Rite retirement process.
I did, Luann. Just after sitting with families for a number of years, I started to see some patterns. Everybody's situation is unique. Don't mistake that. But there are patterns that tend to happen. And what we realized after doing planning for hundreds of families like we have, we started to realize that pattern, if we address these 4 areas, retirement income, your investment strategy, your tax efficient strategies, your estate and legacy situation, we felt like if we address those 4 pillars in retirement, it gave families a much greater confidence level, and it also just really allowed us to cover a wide swath of things in retirement. I've said before in our process touches on up to 25 areas of retirement planning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot.
So your 4 pillars touch on 25 areas of retirement planning.
And maybe a few more than that. We say 25 because it's kind of up to 25, but there are a few other areas that can go down, down other paths depending on a family situation.
Yeah.
I think it's important because I don't know of anybody else that's doing something that's touching on up to 25 areas.
Right.
Most people think about retirement. They just think about their investment statement. They think about their 401k.
Yeah.
That's it. They don't think about the whole plan. And there's a much bigger picture than just the 401k or the IRA statement. There's a lot of other things we have to consider in retirement planning.
So yeah, your R is retirement income. And so like you said, that's going to touch a lot of different areas. Social Security and everything else. Yeah. Guaranteed income. Non-guaranteed income.
Correct.
Then you're going to get to your investments, the I, right? And then what all does that touch?
So when we're looking at the investments, we're taking a look at the diversification of the investments. I think in retirement, we do have to be concerned with how we're invested. I'm not one of these fear mongers that says, oh, you must have, 100 minus your age is how much you should have in stocks. I think that's silly. I think it's all situational based. It's all based on the family's goals and objectives, long-term outlook, all of that. But we take a look at the diversification of the investments, also the investment fees. I've seen throughout my career just portfolios that are just built of high-cost mutual funds. And we're firm believers in low-cost investments like ETFs, maybe mixing in some individual stocks as well. But if you're paying an advisor a fee to work with him or her, then I would think that you'd want your investments to be on the cheaper side, as well. And there's a lot of low cost investments out there today that people can look at. And
then your T is tax strategies. So where does that go? Where do those little feelers go?
Well, that's a deep one. I think we've done a show where it talks about the tax spider web, right? Because there's just a lot of stuff that happens when it comes to taxes. So looking at the marginal rate, the effective rate, where are you at in the modified adjusted income brackets for your NIT tax? Can you do a Roth IRA contribution on the outside? Can you do a deductible IRA contribution in addition to your 401k? Some people can, some people can't.
Right.
We look at all of that, and then we even, if the family's charitable, we even span out into the charitable contribution area. Can we give in-kind assets to a charity? That's something that I am personally going to be doing in the coming years, gifting away some of my appreciation. We talked about that previous to one of our shows. If you're 70 and a half, are you taking advantage of the qualified charitable distribution option where you can give directly from your IRA? So we're looking at all of those different avenues underneath the T. And then, of course, in the estate planning, I'm not an estate planning attorney. I can't give legal advice. I'm not a CPA, and I can't give tax advice.
Right.
But in the estate and legacy area, I can ask questions, right? So I can't give you advice, but I can ask you questions. I can ask you questions that you're not sure how to ask so that we can be sure that we have that area covered. And under the estate and legacy, there's several of those, things that we look at and ask questions about just to make sure the family's good. When somebody chooses to work with an advisor, I think the first thing that they associate with an advisor is investments. We don't want that.
That's true.
We don't want that association.
Right.
We want to be associated with building a plan and looking at other areas of a financial plan. Because I have done second opinions for people that work with an advisor. And that's all they do. They just do their investments, but they didn't ask them any other things about their retirement plan.
Right. Yeah, so that's what, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I've just seen mistakes.
Yeah, right.
Just oversights because of the lack of experience in that area.
Right.
A broker might be good at, buying stocks or whatever, but a certified financial planner professional, we have 5 of those on staff. They're good at planning.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that you can miss and mess up on that can cost you.
So all of these things that you bring up, you have the 4 pillars and then all the things that fall underneath each one of those. How do you communicate all of these in a simple and easy to understand way to somebody like me who comes in off the streets?
Yeah. That's a great question, actually. And we thought of that internally as well, because there's a lot that goes on in my head when I'm talking to people.
Right.
So like I was just rattling off some of those things that we do.
Yeah.
What we do is we have a report card created that we have built out that we show people when they come in and say, okay, you're doing this really well, but here we've got some opportunity. There's some efficiencies that we can make your situation a little bit more efficient if we take advantage of these certain things. So we put it in a format so that it's very easy to understand, and we kind of just boil it down to the report card, and we'll talk a little bit more high level. I don't think most of the families that come in to see us, they don't want to know the nitty gritty details of everything. They want to know how they can make their situation better. And they're trusting you, the advisor, to know what you're doing, to be able to walk them down the path of, I guess, correctness, if you want to call it that, in retirement to make sure they're doing things as efficiently as possible.
So we always hear, number one fear of Americans today, retirees today, is running out of money. Do you believe this to be true? Should this be a real concern for many?
I mean, if you think about it in simple terms, yeah, it should be a concern. But I think, honestly, that term is really overused and really overblown. And I believe that advisors use it as a fear tool to try to scare you. Oh, you don't want to run out of money. Here's the reality, Luann. We're going to spend more money when we first retire than we are when we're 85 years old. And so what I mean by that is I don't think it needs to be the biggest concern. I think people should be more concerned with health care, long-term care, tax-efficient strategies, how your assets are going to pass on to your basically everything in our process. But we do it in a fashion so that you're not worried about running out of money. Of course, here's the reason why it's a fear. Because when you turn off the job income, you just have your nest egg.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't want to spend it. It's all I got. And, I don't want to run out of money. That's all an emotional, psychological fear, and it's all, it's
real.
Okay. It's real. It's a real fear, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you have a plan built out to help you address those fears, you can kind of go out and play, as we like to call it.
All right. Thank you for that. So, Cris, I'd like to start with the R in your process. Tell us what this means, and why is this considered the most important elements of retirement planning?
Yeah. So retirement income is the R.
Yep.
And it is the foundation of a retirement plan. So whether you have pension, Social Security, maybe both of those, maybe you have 2 or 3 pensions in some cases. I've seen as many as 3 or 4 pensions. Social Security, and then you have annuity income. Some families out there have annuity income. Those are all guaranteed sources of income. And I know there's probably people laughing at the TV about Social Security. We count it as a guaranteed stream of income.
Yeah.
So that part of it's really important because we know that's what's coming in on a monthly basis to pay the bills, to pay what we pay the obligations that we owe to basically cover lifestyle expenses. We feel like that needs to be about 80% of what you're spending. If we can get it to about 80%, what that does is that takes the stress off of the investments because you have the bulk of your money coming in on a guaranteed basis and you're not having to pull as much out of the portfolio because we know that as in retirement, we have a nest egg and we want it to last and we want to try to avoid something called sequence of return risk. So the less we have to pull out of there, the better off the portfolio can be long term. Now, if we're going to spend it, that's fine. We're going to spend it. But I'm talking the family that wants to try to make their money last and don't want to run out of money, that's real worried about that, then you want to try to include as much guaranteed income as possible. That means making the right pension decision. That means making the right Social Security decisions. Does that also mean buying some sort of an income annuity? I don't know. Maybe it does. And when I say the A word, I don't want people to get all weirded out about that. If you think about pensions and annuities, they're very synonymous.
Sure.
They both just pay a guaranteed stream of income. Now, if I was at Home Depot and I ran into you and I said, hey, Luann, I got this. I walked up to your car. You're getting in your car. I said, hey, ma'am, do you want to buy a pension? You're like, yeah, I'll take a pension all day long.
Yeah.
If I walked up to you and said, hey, ma'am, do you want to buy an annuity? No, Rob, get away from me.
Look, I'm rolling up the window.
Yeah, exactly. But
push the button.
they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
They both provide a stream of income.
Yeah.
They're kind of the same. But people
Right.
get weirded out by the A word.
Yeah, they do. The A word. I find it interesting you did not mention rental income or dividends as guaranteed income.
Yeah, that's because companies can drop, suspend, reduce dividends. And if you don't believe me, people can go Google it in the last 5 years, look at all of the companies. I won't name any on air.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of companies that suspended or reduced dividends, especially during the COVID years and even in the past 3 years. Okay. So why didn't I include rental income? Because you've got some people out there that have rental properties. They're like, you know, I bought these rental properties and they are a guaranteed stream of income. Well, they are until they're not.
Yeah.
And what do I mean when I say that? Well, you can have a renter that can move out and you can have a gap where you don't have a tenant.
That's a
You
good
could
point.
also have, just think about the state of Florida, all right? Like some rental properties
Weather.
on
Is that what
exactly.
you're gonna say? Yeah.
You get a hurricane, it wipes it out. Oh, don't
Yeah.
worry, I got insurance. Okay, well, great. You have insurance, but you don't have anybody to fix the house because thousands of people are trying to use all of the contractors to fix their house too.
Yeah.
So you could have a gap in a tenant there. So I don't like including, I'm not saying rental income is bad. I'm not at all saying that. I
Yeah.
think it's great. Dividends are great in the right situation. They can also cause you extra taxation as well. But I don't include them in the guaranteed income bucket because they are not guaranteed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good point. You make a good point. Make a good case. Even with the threats of Social Security, not having enough to pay our full benefits, maybe in the future,
Right.
you're still considering Social Security benefits a viable source of income.
I do.
Guaranteed income.
I do. I've said on other shows that about 20% of the U.S. population is on some form of Social Security. That's a lot. So if you're talking about a benefit cut for that many people, many of which are using it as a sole source of income, that's a lot of people that could be out on the street. So I just feel like Congress will fix that, and they'll fix it at the last minute, like they always do things. They will probably raise the payroll tax cap. It currently sits at $176,100. They'll probably raise that. They'll probably do some sort of a payroll tax increase. I've said before, they'll probably raise full retirement age. I think there's several things that they can do, but it's not talked about right now. And frankly, it's aggravating for me because I have to try to keep clients calm and non-emotional because Social Security is very emotional for a lot of people. And another thing that makes it emotional is parents died early. And like, man, my mom didn't even get to collect Social Security. I'm getting mine at 62.
Yeah, that's true.
And they make these emotional decisions rather than making a data-driven decision. We are all about making data decisions, not emotional decisions, because emotions can cause you to make poor decisions if you're not careful, especially with money, because money is very emotional to everybody. You and I, everybody.
Yes, I know that. I do know
Absolutely.
that. Now, is there a source of income that offers inflation adjustments? I know Social Security a little.
It does. Yeah, it does. Does it keep up with the retirees' inflation rate? No.
Yeah.
Because retirees going to pay more in health care
Right.
as they age. I mean, it's just a fact of life for most retirees. So it does offer a COLA, which is great because that does mean your income does go up. If you're a military individual, retiree, or a federal government employee, you also have a COLA adjustment on those pensions. Now, if you're lucky enough outside of that to have a pension, there's a very good possibility your pension's just level. There's no COLA adjusted to it, but still, it's guaranteed stream of income coming in, so that's still kind of nice. There's very few cost of living adjusted pensions and vehicles out there.
Yeah.
That's why investing is important.
Sure,
It is it's important to offset the cost of living and the rising cost of goods for sure.
Right, because I've heard stories about people who had a really good pension, and they were retired for 30, 40 years. And by the end, that really good pension did not keep up with inflation.
No, it's not worth the same, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important as you're building out a retirement plan with the other resources that you have, which most people nowadays have a 401k, government employees have TSPs, whatever, if it's 403b, whatever it is, those other investments do need to be invested based upon your risk tolerance, your goals, objectives. And one of the main objectives for many people should be able to outpace inflation, especially if you have a pension that doesn't have a COLA adjustment on it. You know that in the future, that pension is not going to be worth the same amount of money. So you have to use your other resources to help offset some of that, because you're probably going to need to pull from those investments at some point in the future.
Right. Okay. So again, today we're talking about your Rite retirement process.
Yeah.
And I do love it. It's something that you worked really hard on with your team.
We did.
After kind of like you said, you spent a decade kind of studying your clients and then you and their situations, and then you came up with this process.
Yeah. It started out on a napkin, like a literal napkin. And I was trying to acronym it so we could come up with something that would line up with what do we feel like is really important in retirement. And then it started on an Excel spreadsheet after that. So we went from napkin to Excel, and it works out well. It's also a tool internally that my team, they can't skip over steps.
Right.
They have to ask you the question, because we all know we do a little things differently, right?
Yes,
we all do things a little differently. So that gives us a great process internally as well.
So I'd like to move into the I in the process, and that is investments. I think the obvious thing most retirees getting closer to retirement know that they need to take less risk as they approach retirement. Is that true in your opinion?
It depends answer, because I think it really does depend. And I'll tell you why. If you have a pension, or maybe both husband and wife have a pension and you both have Social Security, you may not need your investments right away. So therefore you can be a little bit more risky with your investments. So I really do think it depends. But I think a lot of advisors out there, again, we're not a fear-driven shop. That's not the way we run our practice. But it's easy to tell you, oh, Luann, you're nearing retirement. You must take less risk. You must take the rule of 100. You must minus take 100 and minus your age, and that's what you should have in stocks. I just think that's baloney. I think it's based on everybody's individual situation. I would say most people are going to want to take less risk because you have risk capacity and risk tolerance. Risk capacity is how much risk can I really afford to take, excluding the emotions.
Okay.
Risk tolerance, that's your stomach. That's the way your stomach feels when the market drops. That's your risk tolerance. There needs to be a way, and we try to do a good job at this, at marrying those two together. What does the data tell me? What's your stomach tell you?
Yeah.
Can we meet in the middle somewhere? Because if we follow the stomach too much, we might be off a cliff in some cases.
Sure.
And that could be being too aggressive. That can be being too conservative.
Too conservative,
right. So you have to find a way to marry those two together, and you do a little bit of that with data. So sequence of return risk.
Yeah.
It is definitely something that I think all retirees ought to think about, especially if you're used to being aggressive and you're the equity tough guy, as I like to call it, and you really don't need to be, because I've seen situations where the person is willing to be more aggressive, but the plan is screaming, no, you can't be aggressive because you're retiring at 59. And if your investments take a 30% loss early in retirement and you live another 25 years, your money won't last, because we've taken such a drop early on, and we know we're going to need that early in retirement. And we also know that we're more likely to spend more money early in retirement because we're younger. You and I were talking at the break about, aches and pains as we get older. It just happens.
Right.
Guess what? That don't get better when you retire.
No.
Those aches and pains only get worse. So being able to go and travel and do those airplane trips, you're going to want to do more of that when you're younger. So you're going to probably spend more money early in retirement. So you do have to be careful from that perspective as well.
Okay, so that's your R in your...
That's the I.
I'm sorry, I meant to say the I in the Rite retirement process. And now I want to go to the T, which is tax efficient strategies. And we talk a lot about tax efficient strategies all the time, but tell us what families need to consider in retirement, both short term and long term.
Well, I think for some families, while the tax code is the way that it is, should consider Roth conversions. I think making good Social Security decisions is another part of the tax decision. And then also tax efficient giving is another area I think families need to focus on. Sometimes we have families come in, they're just not given efficiently. So we kind of work with them on how to give more efficiently. So those are some of the big things when it comes to taxes. I know we're going to try to get through all of the letters, and I want to make sure we have time for each one. But we've done a whole show on taxes, but those are some of the big ones as far as the T in the process.
And do we pay a FICA tax in retirement?
No, it's a really good question.
Okay.
We don't pay a FICA tax.
Okay.
We'll pay federal and state income tax.
Sure.
Right. And I think the other thing to really focus on too, in addition to that, Luann, just since we're talking about taxes, is how to take the money out of a portfolio in a tax efficient way.
Right.
And I've run into situations or seen situations where we're just doing it not efficiently enough.
Yeah,
There's a
right.
better way.
Sure.
And I've had situations in my own family where I've spoken with, other members of my family.
Are you talking to your dad, your mom, your
my father-in-law, who's an electrical engineer, by the way, and incredibly smart.
Guy.
Fixes all the stuff in my house when it's broke.
Good.
Because I don't do that. But so basically, I sat him down, I showed him the numbers, and I said, "Dude, I would do it this way." And I want to be careful because I don't advise them. They're not clients of mine. But I wanted to say, we should consider this opportunity. And you can do what you want, but you ought to look at this and see if it makes sense to you.
Yeah, very good.
You have to be careful with family.
You have to you have to be very careful. Yeah, especially father-in-law.
Yeah, and I have a great one. I'm very blessed. I have great in-laws. I really do.
Good. I'm so glad. Let's talk about Social Security, taxed in retirement, and pensions. Talk about that. Are they?
Yeah, so the Social Security can be taxed depending on your other sources of income. So you can cause it to be taxed. But the good thing that with Social Security is only up to 85% of it is taxed. So I always talk about you get 15% for free.
Yeah.
And in Tennessee and Alabama, those states, Tennessee has no state tax. Alabama does not tax Social Security. Alabama does not tax pensions coming from a defined benefit plan. So federal pensions, military pensions, company pensions from any of the big defense contractors down in the Huntsville, Alabama area, all of that is state tax free. And even in the state of Alabama, when you reach age 65, you can actually pull the first $6,000 out of your IRA without state tax. Now, anything over and above that gets assessed at a state tax as well. So I believe that they're trying to make Alabama a little bit more of a tax-friendly state.
Yeah, I think they are. Definitely everybody's going to want to move to Alabama. Yeah. So the last part of your process, of course, is estate and legacy planning. We always have to mention you are not an estate planning attorney. You refer that out for those situations, but talk about mistakes, oversights you see with estate and legacy planning on a weekly basis.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not an estate attorney or CPA, but I'm allowed to ask questions. When somebody comes into the office, I can ask a series of questions, and being a certified financial planner and going through the tax part of the CFP, the estate planning part of the CFP, there are certain questions that I will ask to make sure you have the basics covered. So what are some common mistakes that I see? Not having your legal documents in place, your will, your power of attorney, your advance directives. Those are 3 basic documents every family needs to have in place. And you would be surprised how many families, the number's astounding, come through my door and they don't have them or they haven't been updated since sometime in the 1990s.
Right.
So of course we refer out to that, but we ask the question and we put it on their radar.
Okay.
Because sometimes we just need to be reminded that we need to do certain things. Talking about death is not easy. Like I don't want to talk about it.
We know it. We all know it's happening, but we don't want to talk about it.
Yes, and I side conversation here, but I just believe that's why God doesn't let us know when that's going to be, because we would be worried about that until it happens. So we don't know the time. So that's probably a good thing. So legal documents are important there, but we also ask about beneficiaries. Are your beneficiaries up to date on all of your accounts? We have so many families walk in and they don't have POD on their bank accounts, checking or savings. You got to have them on those accounts. They don't normally ask you to put them on, so you have to ask them to put them on for you. And then also just putting children's names on bank accounts, really bad idea. Really bad idea. If your son or daughter gets in an accident and that their name's on your account as an owner, it can open up potential legal issues there. So again, we refer out, we just poke around and ask a lot of questions, a lot more than most of your typical advisory firms.
Gosh, there's so much more I want to ask you, but not enough time. So if you have questions, you need to definitely give Cris a call. Thank you so much. As we've seen today, the Rite retirement process addresses 4 pillars that every retiree should consider for retirement income, investments, tax-efficient strategies, and estate and legacy planning. And taking the time to understand each pillar can help families gain confidence in retirement. For Cris and the team at WG Financial Group, I'm Lou Ann Fulmer. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.